Well, I want to introduce our two speakers today. We're privileged to have with us Tuvya Zaretsky, and he is coming to us from Los Angeles this morning. Again, my name is Ben Spots, and I work with Vision Synergy, and I'm sitting in Portland, Oregon today. So Tuvya, we're happy to have you here. And folks, you can read on the screen, he has a lifetime of ministry and currently serves as Director of Staff Training and is the board chair for Jews for Jesus, and Jews for Jesus Israel. And Tuvya and I were talking yesterday, and some of the stuff that's not on here, but it's really important, is a little more about his kids and grandkids. He has some amazing kids and grandkids that are scattered across the U.S. He has a daughter who's married to a former soccer star from Brazil, and the most important thing there is they are the parents of his grandchild, and there's a second grandchild on the way in October, which is kind of fun. And then he has another son who's involved in medical work in California, and another daughter who's out in Atlanta also doing medical work. So thank you for joining us today, Tuvya. And I'm going to introduce Bodil Skjøtt. She is joining us today from Copenhagen, and she has served, as you can see here, the CEO of the Danish Israel mission for a long time. But I wanted to highlight for her that she has this wonderful depth of practical experience cross-culturally after serving in Liberia as a missionary with her family. And so really appreciate that about her. And of course, again, really important, she has 4 grandkids. Kids are kind of important, but grandkids are super important. Yeah. And she is in Copenhagen today to be near 2 of the grandkids. The other 2 live in her home city, which is in a different part of Denmark. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you guys, and we look forward to hearing what you have to share.
Thanks, Ben, and thanks to the welcome here. Thanks to Vision Synergy for the invitation to do this, and for Synergy Commons for putting all this together. I'm really grateful. And just to let everybody know, Bodil and I are really privileged to serve as part of the Lausanne Consultation on Jewish Evangelism. This is where we've ended up. This is what you're going to hear is the product of over 37 years of working together. And I hope that, you can learn and benefit from the things that we've learned and mistakes that we've made. But don't think that every network looks like what we're doing. We're making the way that the Lord has called us, and it's been a great adventure. But I hope it'll encourage you and inspire you to pursue what God has for your network. So ransack this whole conversation for ideas that are good for you. I got to apologize a little bit. My voice is affected by, I think, a blueberry that my grandson handed me off the floor. But anyway, here we go. We want to start with a grand tour of what the Lausanne Consultation on Jewish Evangelism is all about. We want to touch on these 4 things. What is the LCJE? What does the LCJE do? How did the LCJE begin, and how's it arranged today? I'm going to take those first 3, and then I'm going to toss it over to Bodil. The picture you see on the right side is actually the infographic off the lausanne.org website, and you can find more information about the Jewish Evangelism Network over there, among the other 37 special working groups that are part of Lausanne. So we're just one of those 37 special interest groups that you can find. So let me start with, what is the LCJE? It is an issue network of Lausanne. If you look at our website, the lcje.net website, you'll find lots of stuff. If you go to this particular link that you see at the top of the screen, that's the link for the lausanne.org link among all the others, but it'll usually toss you back to the lcje.net website. But so we're a network of people who are engaged in Jewish missions. You see the statement under where it says Jewish evangelism, sharing the gospel with Jewish people, was the beginning of Jewish evangelism. The beginning of world evangelism. As one of those 37 focused interest groups, we have a very, very simple vision, and I think it's one of the things that's helped us hold things together. What we do is bring people together around the concept of Jewish evangelism. And that is practitioners, missiologists, theologians, Bible college seminary professors, pastors, anybody who's interested in Jewish evangelism. And that simple and clear vision that's what we're all about, bringing the gospel to Jewish people and communicating it in a way that the more Jewish people can hear and believe. We operate around 5 very simple, realistic objectives. And I think these have been a really important basis for us, in that we repeat them again and again in all of our literature and in every one of our major meetings. These are the 5 things that we decided from the very beginning that we would do. 1, we share information and resources, and that's with one another. We study and report on current trends. So we're listening to each other constantly and finding out what different ones are picking up around the world or in their specific area of ministry. We want to stimulate one another's thinking on theological and missiological issues. And so we'll bring specialists in, take a particular issue and ask somebody to present a paper on that. We'll strategize on a global level so that more Jewish people will hear and consider the good news of Jesus the Messiah. And in strategizing like that, what we're doing is looking for collaborative, partnering opportunities where we can work together to build the kingdom of God. And then to arrange consultations that will be useful to those engaged in Jewish evangelism. That probably is the most important of those 5 realistic objectives. We want to bring people together and encourage them to work together and to consult, think, plan, study, share. How did LCJE begin? But this is the LOP that came out of the very first gathering. It was in June of 1980 when the Lausanne movement pulled together about 17 mini consultations down in Pattaya, Thailand. Those were to reach unreached, to collaborate with unreached people groups. And there were 5 specialists who were called on to head up one small group among Jewish practitioners, and another maybe 17 workers from different ministries, denominations, different regions of the world. They formed a working group, and out of that came the consultation called LCJE. And they developed a set of rules and procedures that have kind of guided us along. And out of that came this Lausanne Occasional Paper number 7. You can still get it from the Lausanne website. And it tells you who we were, how we got started. But that's the story. We started in 1980. We're still functioning, considered, I believe, the oldest special interest group continuing to function, and one that I'm really delighted to be part of because it's incredibly mature for the people who have all worked so hard together. Bodil, I want to turn it over to you and ask you to let folks know how we're arranged today.
Well, thanks, Tuvya. Well, the way we arranged today is that we made up of a membership. We've got altogether 28 agencies that are a member of our network. And apart from that, there are some other individuals that can be scholars, that can be pastors, people that are not, in a ministry where Jewish evangelism is the only thing they do, but they still have an interest in it. So, the 28 agencies plus the individual member is what make up the network today. And then we organized ourselves into, regional meetings or regional groups, so that, like, for instance, there's one in North America, there's one in South America, one for Europe, one for Israel. And actually, there is now not an area in the world where there's not a regional Jewish evangelism network. The latest that have been added to us is the group in Korea. And you might ask, why is it that people in Korea are involved in Jewish evangelism? Are there any Jews living in Korea? Are there any Jews living in Japan? But I think this says something unique about what Jewish evangelism is about and how the network functions also. The people in Korea are members of this network because they, for their own sake, take an interest in Israel, the people of Israel, the God of Israel, the story of the Bible, and see themselves as connecting with Jewish ministry as a way of understanding who they are and what they do for themselves. So even though there are not many Jews living in Japan or in Korea, we still have members in our network because that's a way for them to understand who they are themselves. And then the way that these regional networks function, well, it depends on where they are and the resources that they have available. For instance, the North American one They would try to have a consultation once every year. I'm part of the European one, and we try to meet every 4 years. And you see the nice logo on your screen is a logo for the next international conference. And this is the 11th international conference that the network organizes. It's going to be in Toronto. Every 4 years we do this one and bring everybody together. That's where you join everybody together, and also the regional networks have a chance to meet each other during those times. And this is where what Tuvya was talking about, the consultations, the network, the inspirations, all that really happens at these international networks. So the next possibility to join an international one will be when we meet in Toronto this next August. Yeah, this is who we are today.
And these are things that we thought of that have been really valuable for us. The first one was the constant battle to serve a network versus building an organization. This one, particularly, I think it is for North Americans. I don't know if it's as big a deal in Europe, but it's maybe Western cultures. We really struggle to balance us on being a network.
I think anytime you've got strong leaders that take initiative, the initiative is not to run with it, but to listen to the network and facilitate rather than run with it. And
we see ourselves. Bodil and I are part of a facilitator team, and we'll explain more about what that is later on. But we have to keep remembering that the network is not an organization. It's the network is the relational connections. It is the people, and when they get together, the things that they think of and choose to do. Our job is to get them together and to do everything we can to encourage and stimulate that kind of engagement. We want to help them, and our job is to keep reminding them of alignment around that shared vision. And it might sound really, really silly and simple, but it's incredibly important to keep saying, hey, we're about Jewish evangelism. Does this area of discussion stray from that? Sometimes people want to get off into global politics, and we have to keep coming back and ask, well, what does that have to do with Jewish evangelism? So having a real simple shared vision is important. Second, focus on the simple, realistic objectives. And I showed you those five purposes of LCJE, concluding with getting people together for consultations. So that's how we reaffirm who we are, what we're doing, and battle against becoming an organization. The second lesson that we've had is cascading communication. And I've got to give some credit to highlighting the work of Patrick Lencioni. That their group talking about the value of cascading communication for leadership and meetings has really been a help and a remind and instructive to me. Again, we're going to remind everybody what our vision is. We're going to remind everybody what our purpose is, what it is that we do. And we keep coming back to that. And you think, well, don't people get tired of hearing that? They might, but it really helps to keep focused, keep a real tight focus for the sake of keeping the network alive and reminding them that they're the network. Those relationships are what it's all about. And what about the importance of communication for inclusion? We need to be able to hear all the voices that are there, even the voices that we disagree with. And that's, come on, we're going to be honest with you. We're going to tell you that we have to battle within ourselves in our planning group to make sure that we're really being honest about hearing from people that we might not agree with, but recognize that it's important to bring all those voices into the conversation and to make sure that they're all included in what's happening. We'll talk more about that, keeping unity, but cascading communication is a really important place to start. Bodil, how about the outcome of the consultations?
Yeah, this has been one of the issues where people say, really, do we need to, travel that far distance, pay that much money to get together? But I think we've seen the benefit of bringing people together, how it stimulates the smaller networks. That, for instance, I come from a very small organization. I believe that if I'd not had the opportunity to join into the network, I would really have felt stuck in my little corner of the world. But the fact that I can, being involved in Jewish evangelism, travel and meet people who are doing the same work, form partnerships and networks with people that are maybe living closer to me, but I wouldn't have met them unless I had come to the bigger platform, and I can move away from there with ideas, with connections, and with material sometimes, or just resources that helps me in my work and have broadened the work that the smaller one is doing. And I think also just getting together helps us develop ideas that we have. You can sometimes get stuck on an idea that you have, but then you've got another person that, you know, asks you questions or say something that is very similar to that, and all of a sudden you've got a joint project coming out of that. It takes honesty and it takes trust building between us, and that takes time. And it takes, you know, it takes spending time together also. Because, you know, honestly, we are also some, you know, each other's sort of competitors. You know, we fundraise in the same places, we look for workers in the same places, and to be able to bring our sort of our the inspirations of all together, not as a way to compete with one another, but as a way of building one another and seeing we're all in this for the greater cause of Jewish evangelism. And really, it's not so important. Is it my name that gets on it? Is it my label that gets on it? But the fact that the things gets done, and even to say, let's do a project together so that, you know, none of us get the credit for it, but the project is lifted up. But one of the things that we have really, you know, gained from was bringing the CEOs together. And it came out of a problem. It came out of a situation where the tension was just almost tangible in the rooms when we got together. And somebody said, we just need to break this barrier. So we started back in 1999, it was, you know, where the Norwegian Israel Mission hosted a conference for CEO, for leaders. And it became a place where people could talk together, spend time together, meet and sort out some of the tensions that was in the room. And since then, the CEOs are coming together no longer to solve tensions, but because they benefit so much from it. And I think we've seen, I mean, this sounds like such, you know, a glorious story, but really it is true that we've been able to share resources. Like, for instance, this summer or this May, there was a bigger outreach project done by one of the organizations. Some of our small organizations, there was no way we could, you know, head up something like that, but we were welcome to send volunteers, you know, to send co-workers, to share the information about it. And in that way, it really became a much better use of the resources that we have together by multiplying what we did together. And, you know, sometimes small organizations, they might not have a large staff that covers everything, but you might have specialists that can big, you know, benefits to the bigger ones, or you've got volunteers that would like to serve, but you can't create a framework for them to serve. You can then send them to some of the bigger, larger organizations. And in that way, the consultation brings us together, ideas starts to develop, and the trust is built that helps us move from there with ideas that we don't feel we've stolen or taken from others, but we built on the ideas that others have shaped, the resources that others have, and we can add our ideas and our investments into that. So the consultation, yes, they are expensive. They bring people together, and out of that comes the ideas and the partnerships and the smaller projects. And again, I want to highlight the CEOs because that's often where the tension is built up. And bringing people together for the fact of spending time together, talking together about the same issues, realizing that I'm struggling with this and so are you, rather than competing. Let's try and see if we, you know, can, you know, add our resource and wisdom to one another and move from there instead of. So the consultations have been very helpful and have brought a lot of good stuff out of that.
Thanks, Bodil.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking as you were talking that those CEO conferences actually took a lot of leaders to neutral places and got us out of our comfort area. And I just remember as being one of the members of the facilitation team going to Norway, really got us out of our comfort zone. We were all served reindeer for dinner one night. I'll never forget that one. Okay. Speaking of the facilitation team, I want to talk about the benefits of a facilitation team. This is what I'm talking about is in our case, it's 4 members who are elected and who are asked to do the business of the LCJE. We remind people about the clear purpose of our organization. I already did it. Our network. It's our job to do the business, to get the consultations in order, to serve the members at large of the network, to make sure that we're observing our rules and procedures and conducting our meetings according to what everybody understands about how we conduct our business. And we have our rules and procedures are about 4 pages long. That are guidelines. They're not laws, but they're a way that guide us in the work that we do. We're responsible for making sure that our network is doing what we've said that we were going to be doing, and to make sure that we're hearing from all the voices that are part of us. So we do the business of the network. That's part of that is accountability. We collect dues from all of our members, whether that's an agency dues or individual membership. We're going to arrange those consultations. Particularly, our group brings together the international every 4 years, and in between, now we've been asked, because the CEOs asked us to do this, we get together those CEO conferences, and we're asking, each time, what do you want to see? What do you want to have done? What kind of things are important for all of us? And so we're the ones who are soliciting reports, and we make sure that the papers are shared. You'll find the papers from the consultations on our website, the lcje.net website, and we're responsible for communicating news out to everybody what's happening with the network. And serving the network interests and preserving the ideas of the network, we're in making sure that we don't become an organization. Those are part of our duties. The role of that facilitation team is as a service team. We recognize that our call, the 4 of us, are supposed to serve the rest of the network. And I might say that we're there because we've been elected. The 4 offices are stated in the rules and procedures of our network. They were established back in 1980. There are 2 members at large who are representing any region or any particular field. We've had people involved in congregational ministry and people involved in outreach ministry. We've had scholars. We've also have an LCJE president who basically presides at the meetings. That's my job. It's stated that person has to make sure that we're staying on track and doing what we're supposed to do in our business meetings, and then in our hosting the various larger meetings. Then we have probably the most important person is the international coordinator, who's the only person who is paid, and they're paid quarter time, and they're paid out of the dues and anything that we have left over from an international consultation. And that's a really hardworking job, because they're doing the really main work of getting us together, planning those consultations, and getting the communication out. I think there's also, and that those votes are taken, those 4 people are voted on every 4 years. And so we've been glad to have a very stable group, and yet rotating folks in who really care about the ongoing of the network. I think the last thing that doesn't often get recognized is the spiritual service to the whole network. We're reminded that every business meeting, whether it's the meeting of the facilitation team or our business meetings at our internationals, or even the international or regional meetings together, they always begin with a reading of scripture and prayer, and an acknowledgement that what we're about is a holy calling, and it is about God's kingdom. It's not about our organizations. It's not about our particular mission efforts. It's that we are all part of something very large that God is doing. And we want to keep focused on that. I think one other area that will bring us forward a little bit is just remembering that we want to keep regarding one another with love and respect and dignity, even if we have differences in the way we approach things. But that's part of the facilitations team job, and that's to make sure that we're relating well as and graciously as a network. You want to start this one out?
Yeah, I can do that. You know, we do have both the website, but I think our sort of tool for communication between us is our quarterly bulletin. If it comes out quarterly, it's like a newsletter, but also one where we share resources in. And we ask the different regional coordinators to submit reports from there. And of course, it's always a challenge to say, let me share what's actually happening or what is not happening, and be honest about the things that we struggle with. This is not a way to report as if you were writing a fundraising letter, but this is a way of reporting to the network where you can ask for help, struggles, and that way, you know, share the responsibilities and the resources that you have together. And I think this is one where we, as a coordinating team, has not always been sort of sharp enough on actually, you know, listening to what's happening in the network and soliciting the ideas and reports, and just encouraging people to be communicating. Sometimes it's easier, again, as you said, you know, just to do it, and rather than to listen and to push people a little harder to get the reports and their ideas in, and then you just go ahead and do it. But in that way, you also miss the ideas and the resources that are out there in the network. So making an honest effort and spending time and resources on listening to the network and communicating what all the network is all about is one where we know that we've got the tools to do it, but we aren't always using them well enough. So yeah, it's a challenge, but it's one that's worth working on. And it's where I think everybody gets a chance to do it. Even small organizations or individual people can contribute to it. So make sure that you, as you know, heading up the network, encourage people to add to it and to bring their voices to the common platform. I think that's what I want to say on this one.
Okay. I'm with a network that's been together 38 years. You can imagine we've got some folks who've been around for a long time, who are the tried and true voices, proven in the field, and yet we became aware several years ago that there are a lot of younger people that want to participate, and for them it might look things might look a little differently. So we're talking about managing relations across generations. It's not just about how to involve younger leaders. I mean, that's what it comes down to. But there's two pieces to this. I think the first one is valuing those who are most experienced in your network, while at the same time involving, that is, give opportunities to share, to grow, to shine to new people, younger people, new people. Give place for them to feel like they can grow. They have a chance to have a voice right alongside of, and sometimes with just as much appreciation and value for all that they bring to the table. And so we've actually asked the younger folks in our network to tell us what they want to hear about, what they want to see studied, what they want to come and talk about. We were very, very surprised to hear how many of them wanted to hear from some of our more seasoned people who took things for granted and really never had a chance to tell how they did things that make it look so easy. But at the same time, we've all been stimulated by the innovation, the interest in uses of social media and avenues that we hadn't even thought of much about, but knew were there for doing evangelism. So we want to give those younger members opportunities and make sure that we're hearing from them. And so our International Coordinating Committee has been really trying to spearhead that, and then through our committee, encourage the leadership of all the ministries in our network to take seriously the responsibility that they have to give those younger people a voice and an opportunity. And it's important to show them, that we value their energy, their insights, and engage their experiences as part of contributors in the network. Bodil.
Yeah.
Culture diversity.
Diversity, yeah. As I mentioned before, we are really a global network, which means you bring different cultures and different church traditions together. And this is, I think it's a richness to it. It's also somewhere we really need to, to want to have this diversity and not see differences as being wrong, but see differences as being something that adds to the bigger picture. What we are together, we're covering more corners of what this ministry looks like than if we were only like in one segment. And that can be difficult for some who've been there for a long time and think, when people join us, they join me. No, when people join us, I become part of them as well. And especially, having moved out to the Asian area, it adds a lot of energy, a lot of good questions, to something we've just been doing for a long time. So I just want to encourage you, to embrace that cultural diversity as a witness, as something that pushes you to keep thinking in new directions. It's not easy. It's easier just to keep doing what you're doing, the same with generations, but it adds so much to it. And it's a blessing to us that our network really is a global network. And that's a benefit, and it's worth the investment in it. And it's also bringing different church traditions together, so that one thing is sort of not accepted in one place is not even a question in another place. And that's where we have to remember, what is it that brings us together? It's not our church affiliation, it's not our cultural sort of identity. It is a question about how do we share Jesus with Jewish people. And when we sort of sharpen on that and focus on that again, it makes it easier and makes it necessary to respect and accept and even embrace the culture and the church differences that we have. So remember the diversity and make it a global network, because it adds richness to it. And it just stays sharp focused on what brings you together. And that's a big help for that.
Yeah. And I think that I keep thinking of our friend Kai Kier Hansen, who was the previous international coordinator. He taught me that we need to remind people that we're not there to agree with one another necessarily. We are there to listen to one another. And the bottom line is to share and appreciate what God is doing in different corners. I think Kai really hit the nail on the head when he said, we don't have to agree with one another. He said, sometimes I don't even agree with myself. So we'll just go from there. What about the challenge of, we picked a term that might be kind of difficult, aggressive optimizers. Let's talk about cross-cultural issues. I think that there are folks who, from their culture, where it's a more hierarchical culture, have a very, very difficult time with a network and seeing within the distinctive in a network of the egalitarian voices, the welcome of everyone with an equal voice, and the feeling that there needs to be more control over who speaks or who presents. And this is a tough one, because you will find in some networks folks who have a difficult time seeing the overall holistic nature of a network, as opposed to wanting to build a ministry. And that's really, really tough. Sometimes it's their own ministry, and sometimes they see the network as the organization that they have to build. And that's a thorny one. It's one that you end up having to navigate very delicately, recognizing that the biggest issues are cross-cultural ones, not necessarily that somebody is just an aggressive optimizer for their own benefit. And I suppose there are some people who are going to see passion for their own ministry and as with a greater lens than the passion for the field, and that does happen. But if we keep announcing that we've got a common commitment to a simple, very clear vision, in our case, Jewish evangelism, but if you keep the focus on that vision, and that vision is bigger than any one mission, any one organization, it really becomes important to be able to help people to maintain that vision. It's difficult to talk about people who are self-interested optimizers, but I think that they tend to marginalize themselves after a while. We have to just be sensitive to that if it's on a personal level, but recognize that a lot of times it is a cultural thing, and it's possible, if we can speak about it as a cross-cultural matter, a difference, that we can help folks overcome that, maybe a blind spot in their own culture, but it's a real one out there. We have to recognize, and I think one way to deal with it is to help everybody know that their usefulness to the network, even if their way of doing it tests our ability to accept them, is still useful. Okay, it's not about having to embrace everybody. It's about embracing the Lord's kingdom and recognizing he's got a lot of different kind of people who are involved in doing that. All right, enough of that one. Last challenge I want to try and deal with is the challenge of becoming a top-down network. Now, we fight against becoming a top-down organization constantly. We are our facilitation team, our international coordinating team, has to continually remind ourselves that we are there to serve the network. And so we look at each other and we ask, hey, did this idea come from others in the network, or is this grassroots up, or is this something that we thought of that everybody needs? And that's a weird thing when you're trying to serve a group of people and you think what you've got in your mind is the best for everybody, and then you realize it's really not their interest at all. So we have to intentionally incorporate the thoughts and the desires of everybody else. We also want to reaffirm the network focus, keep it simple. And if you remember those realistic objectives, I'm going to read them again just so you know. We repeat these at every meeting. I'm repeating them twice here so you get an idea who we are. We share information and resources. We study current trends. We stimulate one another's thinking on theological, missiological issues. We strategize on a global level that more Jewish people will hear and consider the good news of Jesus. And we arrange consultations that will be useful to those who are engaged in Jewish evangelism. These are like our strategic anchors. These are the things that we're going to hang on to. And we measure every activity by asking, well, does that fit into one of those very simple, realistic objectives of our network? And then lastly, the network, the purpose of the network is to network. That's why we have consultations. We want to get everybody together. Sometimes we hear people saying, well, let's all get together and let's all go out and we'll go door to door in the neighborhood where this consultation is going to be held. And we've said to folks, you can do that after the consultation. You could do it in the evenings when we don't have anything going on. But we're here to plan together, to network together, to strategize together, to study together, to find ways to collaborate together, to love one another and appreciate each other, what God is doing. But ultimately, we want to make sure that everybody's doing evangelism better, but as a result of having gotten together through our network. Okay, if you want to know more about what LCJE does, this is now a little dated, but it's still got some very important core stuff in it. This is the Lausanne Occasional Paper number 60. This came out of another forum that was held in Pattaya, Thailand, and it is a call to the church. The Jewish evangelism is important for the spirituality of the entire body of Christ. If God has given up on his covenant relationship and covenant care for Jewish people, then we would have to be concerned about his covenant promises of the new covenant. He hasn't, obviously, and so the new covenant in Jesus Christ is preeminent. So I hope those little ideas are just something to get you started. And Ben, I'm going to kick it back over to you to see if there's any questions.
We've got at least 8 questions here. I'm hoping they're really hard, but let's just take a breath for a moment. Again, about 30 of you online, and if you click on the Q&A button, it should be at the bottom or the top of your screen. You can type in a question there, and we'll try to get to it. And if not, I know these guys would love to interact with you after the webinar as well. So take a breath. A lot of great lessons there from active network facilitators who've been part of this network for a long time. I'm going to start out with a question, because that poll, one of the highest felt needs there was, how do you set expectations, sort of get participation? So do you have any hints on how you've gotten people to buy in, I guess, or participate at a certain level that you want? Any practical hints?
Can I go on that one? I think part of because we've been there for such a long time, I think people have seen the benefits of the network. It's where you meet, it's where you get the new ideas, it's where you have a chance to bounce off what you are doing with one another. So people come because they feel that they are missing out if they don't. It's a place for them to share their ideas and hear what others are saying about it. It's a place for them to buy into some other projects that is there. So I think people, because it's been there for such a long time and it has established itself, people feel that they are missing out if they're not coming. They don't look at the program. And we do have a program where we get together for an international conference. But I think for many over the years, they would, maybe this is too easy to say, they would almost come regardless of what the program is, because they want the network and they want the inspiration of the others. They wouldn't come unless we arrange the consultation, but bringing together and allowing enough room for people to share, to rub shoulders, to present their ideas is really what's important at these consultations. So people feel they're missing out if they don't come. I think this is part of what it is. And of course, it's the challenge is to include new ones. And that's where getting the Japanese, the Koreans, some of the Asians on board has really been us ourselves asking new questions, because we haven't met those questions before. So we see the benefit of having people that come from a totally different angle, how much that adds to our thinking.
That's great, very helpful. Now, maybe take yourselves back a few years to when you were a new network, or maybe you've been part of other networks that have started out. But we do have, you remember, a few people who are just starting out networks. And we did have a question from someone who asked, what would be the very important first steps, in your opinion, to building a network?
I'll grab that one. I think nailing down that vision, nailing down the what your simple vision of what brought you together is extraordinarily important, so that people know that's what we're networking around. And then secondly, to ask, well, what is it that we can do that will help achieve or enhance that goal? Those are hard things to think about. As I looked at the 5 purposes that we came up with, I recognize some of those actually reflect some of the work that was done at Lausanne 74, that was part of what Lausanne does, and that was helpful. That was really helpful.
Well, just on that, Dave actually asked, those 5 objectives or purposes. You said you got to keep repeating them. But how do you avoid it becoming sort of wallpaper? Or another way of saying that is, how do you avoid those 5 things from just sort of being ignored because they're too familiar?
Because we build them into the program. We actually intentionally find people to help us to bring reports. We look for people who bring really tough theological questions, put them out there. And the idea is, this guy doesn't have the answer. This woman has not got the final say on how to do this. We want to get the thoughts, stimulation, interaction from the floor. And I'll tell you, some of that gets really interesting. And that's where the welcome of diversity and the willingness to respect one another without necessarily having to agree all together on stuff. Maybe,
and you mentioned this when I talked to you yesterday, when you think about those controversial topics that have come up, can you give a specific example? And then, sometimes a network has to make a unified statement or position paper. So how do you get to a place of unity despite that diverse thinking?
Bodil, can I take that one?
You can.
Okay, because we talked about this a little earlier. We had a conference paper, and we were talking about what some of the key issues should be. That's always a sensitive issue, because people want this major statement speaking on behalf of everyone. It's hard to get everybody to agree on one thing. But somebody said, we should condemn replacement theology. And one of the participants, one of the leaders, was so eloquently said, I'm Lutheran, and my Reformed position might be seen by some folks as a replacement theological position. But you know me, I'm not a replacement theologian. I believe that the gospel is necessary for Jewish people. And I believe that we're part of a unique expression of Israel. And he said, and I don't mean that to displace the people of Israel, the ethnic people. And it was a very poignant, sensitive moment, and we were hearing one another, and we had to recognize, okay, well, we can't necessarily take a public stand on that, because people want to understand the nuances.
I think there's another way we've dealt with it too, is to say, we are here because of this. Some of us think like this, others think like that. And in that way, we've been able to say, this doesn't, we don't need to separate because of this, but we can have different opinions about it, and being able to express that in the statements we have come out. But I think having to work on those conference statements, sometimes think, isn't this a waste of time? Let's just get our head to do it. But I think having to sharpen our thoughts and the way we express ourselves by putting out these statements has really made it clear to us what brings us together and how we can embrace one another, even though we look different at, at certain issues.
Good.
So conference statement is a difficult thing to do, but it's worth the effort because it helps us, listen to one another.
We have a couple questions here about, you as facilitators. Jeremy was asking, are you or the other two facilitators leaders of organizations or ministries, or are they really sort of helpers or assistants to leaders? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Bodil?
Yeah, I think we're all asked to serve on this one. We are elected at the international conferences, and we are not sent by our organizations to do this. We are, elected by the members at the consultation, regardless of the position that we have. So sometimes, there is kind of this understanding. We do want the facilitating team to represent the broad perspective of the network. So for instance, Tuvya and I have different genders, that's good. Others of the team, come from different parts of the world. And I think there is the members see the benefit of our diversity in that, but we are elected because of our own persons. We're not sent by an organization. So in that way, we feel that we are responsible to the network and not to the organization that has sent us where we're working. For instance, I'm a retired person right now. I'm not sent by an organization. I'm elected by the network because of my experience there.
Yeah, specifically, know that we're not all CEOs. And I'd say over the years, it's been a combination, a mixture of one or two CEOs out of the four. Very often we're senior people within our ministries who have a heart to serve and are set free, kind of seconded to help do this with our network.
That's great. One of the first questions we had was from Chris. It was real practical. Can you give a few examples of cascading communications?
Yeah, we have. This is an area where we've talked, particularly since we were in Wheaton last June. It's an area where we could do better as a ministry. We need to be able, our organs for reporting what has taken place at the conferences we could be doing better at that. We put the papers from the consultations on our website, and it's time for us to spruce that website up. So yeah, it's those are areas where anything that we can do. Our bulletin, we realized it gets published. We've been doing it, like that. But we're thinking, hey, a lot of this stuff needs to be available online. But the bulletin's, one of the features of our dues, $15 a year, So how do we give that away? Well, maybe we just have to do that. Those are the kind of questions we're wrestling around with right now. But we have a bulletin and a website, and we want to publish all the information that we can, and make sure that all cascades out, and make sure people know what we're thinking.
Well, in a way, it's nice to hear you don't have everything solved. We know.
Are you kidding?
Yeah, we're all in progress. Kirk had a question about any other technology that you use to advance your core commitments besides a website.
We do have the Facebook, as a place to meet. And I think, the website, I'm almost going to say don't go there because it doesn't look the way we want it to look. But that's just, it's a result of having been there for a long time. And we've got younger members and people who had a different, take on it, pushing us now to do something about it. Yeah. And that's, again, why you need to have people from different parts, both generation-wise, culture-wise, to make sure that you've got the sharpest way of communication, because they say, that doesn't work for our community, that's not how we communicate. And
for sure. A few other quick questions here as we wrap up, and my colleague Daniel has encouraged all of you who are online here to, if you have one particular quote that caught your attention or some lesson, something God spoke to you in the last hour, could you just put that in chat? We oftentimes capture the comments from different participants in our summary email that goes out after this. And if you're worried, we will share the PowerPoint with you as well. So just a couple final questions here. This is back to your role as facilitators. Kirk was asking, who has freedom to represent the network to those who are outside of the network? So is that only something facilitators do? So, he's talking about the tendency to leverage the network for personal gain. but the context is who can represent your network to others who are not part of it.
Well, Bodil and I are here because we're Lausanne Catalysts, and we became Lausanne Catalyst because we're part of the international coordinating team, and those on the international coordinating committee are free to speak on behalf of Lausanne, and we try and rotate it around who's speaking in which venue. But yeah.
Well,
I think there's,
go ahead, Bo.
I think the reason why we've got like a person that is the president, because that kind of gives a voice to it, and I think we've got one that is the coordinator that's more informed about what the practical things are, and you know, at the international meetings that person is elected. I think it gives both the responsibility and the privilege to, you know, to speak on behalf of the network. But again, you know, it's a network, and a network is what network members make of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's both the danger and the beauty of it.
Somebody had a real practical question about prayer. How much time is given to having consistent prayer between the ministries? So just, this person was commenting that, you know, their background is in mission work from different parts of the world, and consistently praying in unity seems to go a long way to increasing respect. So didn't know what you've seen.
Boy, you know, that is a function of the network. There are the people who are really passionate about prayer, often are the ones who are organizing and stimulating that. Do we have somebody who takes prayer requests for?
We've decided that whenever we meet for our, you know, Zoom meetings as an board, we will, you know, take ourselves the time to say, so what are the 2-3 things, you know, within our network right now that we should put up as prayer points. And I'll say also, we have back in time tried to have like a prayer letter where people, you know, organizations members could send in their request. It's something that has not worked for us. It's difficult. And I think, again, the Wheaton meeting really stimulated some questions for us. One question was, you know, do we listen well enough to our network? And the other one, how do we create a practical framework around that indicates that prayer is important to us? So these are issues where we know they're important. They're not easy to work with. We've done it, and they slipped, and we need to get back on the horse again. You know, with some
except for the Korean and the
That's right. That's
are
right.
incredible.
Yeah.
So last question before we wrap up. We had somebody ask, are you involved with evangelical alliances in different countries? And kind of related, somebody was asking, you know, what about people who are not wholly focused on your issue? This is Ed Brown was asking about, he has a creation care network, but there's some people who want to do a little bit of that, but they're not focused wholly on that. So how do you relate to those people?
I'll take the first one, and I can't speak to the rest of the world, but I can say that in North America, we've been involved with the Evangelical Theological Society, and about 5 years ago, we petitioned for a study group on Jewish evangelism, and that was accepted, adopted, and every year, including this year, 2018, we'll have a special study group on those issues. So really, really glad for that one. Bo, do you want to take the other one from Ed?
Oh, what was it? Just repeat it again. What was it?
How do you interact with people who are not wholly focused on your issue of Jewish evangelism, but they're an organization that does that a little bit of the time, and they'd like to be associated with your network? How do you?
I think this is where it's so important, you know, to underscore why do we come together? So if you come to this network, it's all about Jewish evangelism, and, you know, and say we all have different agendas when we leave from here. You know, for instance, you know, our organizations, one of sort of the point for us is reconciliation, to work on that, you know, within the Israel-Palestinian context. You know, we can get inspiration. We can say that at the platform of the network. We can't expect everybody to, you know, to jump on our bandwagon and say, let's do this as a network. But there we meet people who share a common concern, and we, you know, we take that. But, you know, call us back to, if you come here, Jewish evangelism is what brings us here, and then there are other issues that are, you know, in conjunction with that. I want to say that one of our CEA members actually spent some time with Ed at one of the consultations, saying, wow, I need to think about creation care. You know, this, so I think the fact that we bring together around this one here, you know, put these things in, but getting back to say, why are we here? Jewish evangelism. And then we've got other issues where we meet people who share that, take it with them and go back and work, you know, cooperate with them as you leave from the platform.
Well, I want to just say thank you to you both. As we wrap up, a couple of very important things for everybody who's listening. First of all, this has been Eat, Pray, and Partner Lessons in Network Facilitation with Tuvya Zaretsky and Bodil Skjøtt. And we're so appreciative of your many insights and the wisdom that's born from experience. And just to reassure everybody, because you've registered, we will be sure that you can see a video of this webinar. If you want to share that with somebody, it'll be available in about a week. The PowerPoint will also be available. And you'll be getting within the next hour a survey, because we are always open to ways we can do these webinars better. So we'd love you to respond to a short survey that will come to you by email. And just a reminder that this is a service of the Synergy Commons, which is people like Tuvya and Bodil who come together and they have practical wisdom on this online interactive portal. And we have discussion groups there. We invite you to be active on the Synergy Commons and join another webinar in the future. We hold these about every month or every other month, covering a variety of topics, all the way from millennials and mission, to how do you get churches more involved in networks, to lessons from one of the oldest networks as part of the Lausanne movement, which is what we heard about today. So thank you for joining. May God bless you wherever you're at. Goodbye.